What's up, geeks? Welcome back to the Stay Geek Studios. Something a little different in the location today. I'm in my office room, or we could call it the den. I don't know. So I got a new Chromebook, so I'm actually recording the video on this. Let's see how it works, see how it comes out. Hopefully, it'll be pretty cool. So in my last video, I mentioned that I was working on that 2001: A Space Odyssey comic book adaptation by Jack Kirby, and trying to edit that video because the file sizes were so long. It's like an hour and 45 minutes long, I think. And I shot it on my phone, and it split it up into three different files. And I had so many other files on my phone that I wasn't able to connect all the files into one, long video. And it'll take me a long time to explain to you all of the technical difficulties involved with that. So anyway, I think what I'm going to go ahead and do is just I haven't made any progress on splicing those three files together. So I'm going to go ahead and just release it as a two-parter, I think. The way the video is shot anyways, there's about a 30-minute introduction where it's just me talking to the camera. And then there's the second part, which is going through the actual comic book itself. So that's probably how I'll go ahead and do it for brevity's sake. And I could just move on to other videos like this one. So I'm shooting this video in the meantime. Went to Second and Charles a week or two ago. Found myself in there. And that place is really... if you're a comic book collector and if you have one in your town, they're definitely worth checking out. They have great deals in there. I've found some amazing stuff in Second and Charles. So where I live, what I have to choose from is like half-price books, Second and Charles, Barnes and Noble, of course, which is retail full price. But in terms of like used bookstores where you can buy used comics and graphic novels and so forth. And of course we have various comic book shops, which most of them are great. But sometimes I go into places like Half Price Books and Second and Charles to find really deals on like trade paperbacks is I think, and like hardcover omnibuses, like this one here, The Avengers by Jonathan Hickman. This brick of a book. This is volume number 1. You can find something like this at Second and Charles, maybe for $75. The retail price of this is $125. Some of these are up to like $150. This is a very thick book. Because it collects, years worth of, in this case, Avengers comics by the great Jonathan Hickman. Funny story, this was actually the first edition, the first print run of this book. I actually bought the second print run of this book, which came out earlier this year. I bought it by mistake, forgetting that I had this one. And I got a pretty good deal on it on Amazon, but I've got 2 of these now, and I don't know I know they collect the same comics. There may be different so-called features. There may be different sketchbook works and different promo posters and that type of thing in each book. I haven't examined both of them, so I'm not gonna put this one up for resale just now because there could be differences between the first and second editions, which still makes the books unique. So anyway, you could find something like that used for probably like $75. I've seen them sometimes as low as $50. at Second and Charles, especially. Half price books, I go there really for the books. I haven't been super impressed with their comic selection, at least not the one local to me. So I don't really look at their comics or their graphic novels. They don't devote the floor space to that stuff that Second and Charles does. You know, they're more about books. But Second and Charles is just, it's all of them that I've been into, they're massive square footage. It's like a warehouse of used books and video games, and it's a geek hangout for sure. And the one I go to has a Starbucks right next to it, and they're connected, so it's it's cool to go in there and grab yourself a coffee and hang out and browse around for a while and look for deals. So when I was in there, what I found was something really interesting. Sorry about that. I bumped into my printer down here. Epic Collection Iron Man, Return of the Ghost. This is volume 14, $22.50. This is basically in brand new mint condition. Not that like conditions really matter a whole lot. I mean, these aren't like super collectible like individual comic books are, but this is, let's see, this covers Iron Man 233 through 244 and Marvel Fanfare 22 through 23 and 44. So this is 1988 to 1989 Iron Man comics is what it is. I like these Marvel Epic collections because they do a really good job of culminating all of those certain periods that these comics were published, and they print them on pretty good high quality paper. I don't know if they recolor them or touch them up or anything like that. I believe that there's probably a certain amount of that, from the originals. And chances are, let's see, 88 through 89. So I wasn't collecting Iron Man at that point. I wasn't collecting comics at that point. So this is a run of Iron Man that that I have not read. I haven't seen. My period of collecting the individual Iron Man comics is more like early 80s to mid 80s. Probably around 81 to 84, maybe a little bit into 85. But yeah, they give you each cover of each book. This is back when comics were 75 cents for these copies. And that's kind of when I got out of comics. Is I started when they were about 35 cents, and I got out about when they were about 75 cents. Of course, now, get a copy of Marvel Iron Man present day comics. I think it's like $6.99 or some crazy shit like that. Comic prices today are just, they're not moored to reality, in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, so, there's some Spider-Man action involved with some of this. So, and I like these 80s Iron Man comics. Oh, and one of the really cool things about this one, that besides the price being cut in half, because these normally retail, I think, for something like $44.99. Yeah, $44.99 is what this would go for new. And this is new. I mean, this is essentially a new copy. Whoever had this and brought it into them probably read it once and then just took it in, or they didn't read it at all. I mean, this you could sell this at Barnes and Noble. I mean, this is a pristine copy. And I just got it for half price. That's why Second and Charles is awesome. But what this has in here, in that period of time, the desktop publishing revolution was just beginning, and I was sort of a part of that, but not really a part of it. So I had gone to school for graphic design and printing, and unfortunately the shitty school that I went to didn't foresee the desktop publishing revolution. So when I went looking for a job, I wasn't trained to use desktop publishing, nascent technology as it was coming out in the late 80s. And so that was basically like your Apple, your very first iterations of the Apple desktop. I don't think the Mac had even been introduced yet. So we're talking like the first Apple desktop. It usually ran software, I think, by Amiga. And, eventually the PC started to have some desktop publishing software capability. And so that revolution had already started. Old school printing techniques that had essentially been around since the first printing press, the Gutenberg press. So we're talking the techniques that were developed in the medieval times for printing really basically were just carried on into the late 70s, early 80s. There wasn't really that much of a difference in them, believe it or not. The only difference was the automation in the machinery they used, but as far as the actual techniques of getting ink and paint onto paper, that hadn't changed. So anyway, what this has in it, starting at the very beginning, is something called Iron Man Crash. Iron Man Crash was, I believe, marketed by Marvel Comics as the first computer graphic novel. So they basically designed it on probably a Apple desktop and printed it out and colored it. So it's got that real sort of like, early 80s grain look to it, sort of that grainy reproduction look. And then I guess they colored it after that. They probably printed, I'm sure they printed it in black and white initially, sent it over to the colorer. You can tell the lettering, I think, I'm not sure if the lettering has been redone in this edition as opposed to the actual original edition. But that lettering is obviously not hand lettered like a lot of comics of that era still were. It's more like it's printed out. And of course, the story's very kind of like cyber tech oriented. it looks kind of retro now. But back then this was like cutting edge. They probably sold, I don't know, I'll have to check the figures, but because of the novelty of it, they probably sold 1 million copies of this. Now, I actually have this graphic novel. It's an oversized hardback, and I think I found that at there's a local place called Book Nook. They're also pretty decent for bargain used comics. I think I found it for like $5. I haven't read it yet. I've heard the story isn't that great, but I still I have a thing for these early era computer comics. They're kind of a novelty, and I think now they look kind of cool, as opposed to the slick, overproduced sort of comics that we see a lot of today. Oh, here's a digital Nick Fury. He's chomping on the cigar, He's drinking a glass of bourbon neat, no ice. Yeah, so that's cool. That when I saw that was in here, I was like, oh yeah, that sold me, But then later on, it gets into the more traditional, comic book art content of the era. So yeah, that was cool. But yeah, these epic collections, this brand here, is really good. I've got some Fantastic Fours of these. I've got some of the Hulks from the 70s. Marvel does a really good job with these. I just don't want to pay, the $44.99, retail price for these. And so when I can find used ones, I pick them up because they I don't know what the time frame is on these, but from what I can tell, I mean, they pretty much start at the beginning of the titles going back into the 60s and go all the way up till probably at least through the 90s, So it's just you can read these in chronological order. So what you would do is you would take, 4 or 5 of these would be a big brick omnibus book in and of itself. But this is just a different format, a different way to read these. If you don't want to collect the big omnibus books, you can pick these up individually, and they'll run you through about 2 years worth. There's probably 25 to 36 issues of comics in here. Here's some space action too. So yeah, pretty cool. That was a good find. The other thing I found there, which I was super excited about, was I found another copy of All Star Comics, volume number 2. So if you recall from my previous video about this, I found volumes 6 and 7 at the same place, and they had volumes 1 and 2, and I didn't grab them because I thought I already had them. And I realized I didn't, and I was kicking myself for that. Well, and I went back to get them, and they were gone. Well, volume 2 came back. These are also fantastic. So DC Comics, what they did now, these are hardcover. These are just fantastic books. I can't say enough good about them. They always have these really good slick dust jackets on them. The color reproduction is just fantastic. So let's see, the inside cover. Get ready, get set for the flow of endorphins. The original super team is back for its second encore appearance. The Justice Society of America, in all its original splendor, is back for 4 more blockbusting adventures, issues 7 through 10 of the highly prized All-Star Comics. You would have to pay at least $10,000 for mint copies of these 4 issues. But you now have these history-making issues bound in a single volume for less than the price of a night on the town. I paid $16.75 for these. This retailed, though, I don't know if you can see that. There you go. At $49.95. This is a $50 book I got for $16.95. And again, somebody read this one and done. This thing is in mint freaking condition, man. Look how white those pages are. That's insane. I mean, I was like, hell yeah. So the 4 issues of the Justice Society of America, including the letters pages, or like they would put like these little like stories in them. Here's a story about Hop Harrigan, one of their sidekicks. So you get like written stories. I was mistaken. I don't think they had letters pages back then, not in DC Comics, but faithful reproductions of the work. And 4 issues. I mean, you look, this is a pretty decently thick book. So 4 issues. Well, back then, the comics used to be like 70 pages or so. So, I mean, they would be pretty thick. And that's kind of something they've returned to now in the modern era, I guess, to justify their $7.95 price points. But, back in the day, you could get 70 pages for 10 cents. 10 cents, man. That's insane. But they could do that because they one, they didn't pay the artists and the writers very much money. But they printed it on cheap newsprint. Like the cheapest possible paper you could find. They would print them on there. Fortunately, though, DC kept, I guess, all these original pages of art and so forth, and were able to reproduce them in these very slick books. With pretty, I think these have a pretty faithful color reproduction. I don't think they've altered the colors in them like they did in the originals, and that's what I'd like. So I mentioned that before. A lot of comics that you see collected, the color that you saw in the actual floppy book you bought in 1982 is different than the collected trade paperback you bought in 2012. They'll pop the colors a little bit to make it seem more, there's more pizzazz to it. And, an older comic book, the you know, the margins of the pages, unlike this, you know, they're going to be yellowed. You know, they're going to gray a little bit or discoloration. It's just because it's the cheap newsprint. One of the good things about, you know, having comics in this format, though, is, you know, this is a high quality paper stock. It's not gonna, you know, it's not gonna lose its white, you know, veneer anytime soon. It's not gonna, like, you know, fade or change to like a yellow or something like that. So look at these 2 pages. I mean, that's a lot of talking on these pages. That is a ton of word balloons. There's a lot of conversation going on right there. Um, yeah, I'm trying to make sense of everything that's happening here. That's just you don't. That's so that's kind of a no no is to have that much verbiage these days. That there's a school of thought, you know, where you want to kind of go minimalist. This is interesting here. Here's a Wonder Woman story. Um, but look at the lettering. It's different. It doesn't look hand lettered at all. It looks like they use some kind of a printing. So here, looking at this, I don't think this lettering is original. It's typeset for sure. And back, so if it was typeset back then, like they use like typewriter, like, you know, Gutenberg press again, um, to get that in there. Or in the reproduction process for this book, maybe the original lettering was so faded or messed up on the original artwork, they just went ahead and lettered over it. Like you can print out small little bits of text and paste them over the original lettering and then reproduce it, you know, by photographing it and then adding back in the color and so forth. Because I know, because I've done stuff like that when I was learning my useless graphic design and printing reproduction skills in trade school. Um, so yeah, and again, you know, standard, they reproduce all of the covers for each book, which is also very cool. Which I just love the covers for these old books because